Hello, welcome to Dan's IT Network. And for today's video, we'll talk about OSPF, DR, and BDR election. Before we do that, let me tell you something about OSPF. OSPF stands for Open Shortest Path First, and it is a IP routing protocol that uses a link state, also known as the LSA. So LSA, this is the link state advertisement. Okay, and they're using the link state advertisement, okay, to communicate with the other routers. All right. So let's say if the OSPF is enabled on this entire network, so we have here the R1, R2, R3, and R4. There is an election process that is happening on a network. Okay, so what is OSPF does is it is trying to elect which one of these routers, all right? So R1, R2, R3, R4. So which one of them should be the DR, all right, or the designated router, and BDR to be the backup designated router. So to make it easy to understand, when we say DR, this is acting like the let's say a president, all right, and then a BDR is the vice president. So let's say if the president resign on his position, then the vice president will take over. Okay, so in the network, if the DR goes down or went down, then the BDR will take responsibility. All right. And the OSPF, DR, and BDR election is recommended to use on a multi-access network. So this is an example of multi-access network. Okay, why? It's because all of this router 1, router 2, router 3, and router 4, they are connected to the switch and they are on the same network. All right, so this is the 1.1, all right, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4, and I already labeled their IP address, and they are registered on each port. All right, so gigabit 0/0 has this IP address, and this one 1.2 gigabit 0/0, okay, and so on and so forth. All right, so how do we determine though, or how we can apply the DR and BDR? Well, in OSPF we have a process. All right. Well, we have here number one, the highest priority number. So whoever has the highest priority number, right, will become then the DR, and the second highest will become the BDR. Okay, well, we can set this highest priority number by configuring on each router. We can set it from 0 to 255. Well, if you want this R1 to be the DR, then we can put a priority number of number 10, and then the R2 will be, let's say, number 9, so that it can act as a BDR, and then the rest though will make it like 1 or even 2. Okay, but by default all of the routers priority number are set to number 1. Okay, and if we do not want to configure this priority number, then the second thing that the OSPF will do is it will compare the router ID, and we can also configure this router ID under the OSPF. All right, so whoever has the highest router ID, then it will win. So will become then the DR, and then the second highest router ID will become the BDR. Okay, so let's say we don't want to configure this highest priority number and the highest router ID. Then the next thing that the OSPF will do is it will look for a, virtual interface on each router. Okay, so when we say a virtual interface, these are like the loopback interface that we can create per router. Okay, and we can set up an IP address to each virtual interface though. So whoever got the highest IP address on the virtual interface will win. Okay, so it will become the DR, and then the second highest IP address on the virtual interface will be the become the BDR. Okay, and then let's say if we don't do something on it, all right. Let's say we don't know the process, all right. Well, the last one that the OSPF will do is it will compare their IP addresses, all right? So from R1, R2, R3, and R4. So whoever got the highest IP address will win. So as you can see in here that the R4 has this IP address 1.4, okay? And then the R3 has the 1.3. So what will happen is the R4 will become then the DR, and then the 1.3 will become the BDR. Maybe you might want to ask, what if we don't have DR and BDR electioned on OSPF? Well, that is a good question, okay? Let's say on this network, the OSPF is running. Still, the R1, R2, R3, and R4 will treat each other as neighbors, all right? Well, since we don't have DR and BDR, then the R1 will send a link state update to R2, and also R1 to R3, and then R1 to R4. And same thing on this R2, it will send a link state update to R1, and then to R4, then to R3. And then this R3 will send a link state update to R2, to R1, and then to R4. And then last, for the R4, it will send a link state update to R1, to R2, and R3. So you notice that there is a lot of communication, right? And actually, it can cause a flooding on a network, and it can suck up a bandwidth, all right? And in Cisco CCNA, it is not recommended. So that is why the BDR and DR was invented. Okay, so using the BDR and DR, let's say the router 4 is acting as the DR, then what will happen is the R2 will just directly send the link state update to R4. And then to this R1, it will send the link state update to R4. And then this R3 will send the link state update directly to R4. And then the R4 will send the link state update to everybody. Okay, so R1, R2, and R3. So you notice that it will actually lessen the flooding, and we can also save bandwidth. All right. And another thing, what if the R4 went down? All right. Well, if the R4 goes down, then we do have here a backup designated router. So the R3 will take over, right, of the R4's job. All right. So let's enable the OSPF on all of the routers. Okay. And all of these routers, they are on the same network. You notice that I already labeled them 192.168.1.0/24. On all of them, they have the same. Okay. Because again, this is a multi-access network, and they should be on the same network. Okay. All right. And let's open the R1. I'll go to command line interface. I'll hit enter to get started. I'll type here enable to go to the privilege mode, then COMT to go to the global config mode, and I'll type here router space OSPF and then number one. Okay, and then I'll type here the network, and then 192.168.1.0. Okay, and then the inverse format of the subnet mask, it should be 0.0.0.255. Okay, and then space area number one. So why it is 0.0.0.255? This is the inverse format of 255.255.255.0. Okay, and I'm just gonna copy this because we'll be using the same command on the other routers. And let me execute this. Control C, and let me now save the configuration. Go to the R2 command line interface, and then I'll hit enter to get started. Enable, and then COMT to go to global config mode, and I just have to paste this command. There you go. Sorry, I forgot to input the router OSPF 1. Okay, there you go. And let me paste this command. All right, so network 192.168.1.0 and 0.0.0.255 area number 1. All right, I'll put them in the same area. So Control C, and then save the configuration by typing right. And let's do the same thing on the R3 command line interface. I'll hit enter to get started. Enable, CompT, and then router OSPF number 1. And then I'll paste the command. Control C. Let me save the configuration. Let's do it fast. Or just the same command, okay? Enter, enable, COM-T, and then router OSPF number one. I'll paste the command. There you go. And then I'll hit enter, Control C, and I'll save the configuration. Sometimes getting a result on the election of DR and BDR is inaccurate. Okay, for example of that scenario is, let's say on this network, okay, let's say all of the routers are off, all right, and then you turn on the router one first, okay, and then router two, and then router three, and router four. So what will happen is the first router that you turn on, that will automatically will act as the DR, even if it has the lowest IP address, which is 1.1. And then the second router that you will turn on is the R2, will act as the BDR, okay, and then our R3, R4, and then once they are on, all right, all of them, and then the election process for DR and BDR will take some time on the OSPF to go through. All right, and if you are the network administrator, then what you can do to prevent this to happen is, let's say if the R4 is the DR, then I guess is the network admin will restart first the R4, and then we'll go to the R3, and then R2, and then R1. Okay, so let's open the R1, and let's check the status of the BDR and DR. Okay, so I'll hit enter to get started. I'll type in here enable to go to the privilege mode, and I'll type here show I space IP, and then space OSPF. All right, and then I'll type here NEI, and I'm just gonna hit the tab on the keyboard to complete the wording, and I'll hit enter. All right. So as you can see in here, all right, uh, so this is a full DR, all right, and as you see that the 192.168.1.4, all right, is the DR, okay, as you can see your full DR, all right, and this is the priority number that I'm talking to you a while ago, right? So they are all number one, okay, for the priority number, okay, and the BDR is the 192.168.1.3. Okay, as you can see here, it's a full and then a BDR. All right. You see here, this is the 1.3 is the R3, so this is the BDR. Okay. All right, and the 1.2, it says in here the state is a two-way drawer. So meaning of this is this router is actually listening to the DR and BDR and letting them know that this 1.2 is on the same network. Okay, and as you can see here is that we cannot see the status on the R1, all right? The 1.1 is not showing. Well, it's because, all right, we are on the R1, all right? That is why it's not showing, okay? And let's say we'll open this R4, all right? And we do know that this is the DR, right? And then I'll hit enter to get started, enable, and then I'll type the same command, show IPOS PF, and then let's say neighbor. There you go. All right, so let me spread this. And as you can see in here is I cannot see the full DR. All right. Well, it's because I am on the R4, so I am inside the R4. So if that is the case, then if you cannot see the DR, then you are on the R4. Then definitely the R4 is the full DR. All right. So you can see the same information in here. The BDR is the 1.3. So we do know that this is the router number 3, and the 1.2 and 1.1. Okay, they're showing that they are the full drawer. Okay. So again, meaning of this is they're listening to the BDR and DR. Let's do something different on the election process. So we'll try to play around with the network by changing the priority number. So what we'll do here on the R1 is we'll set the priority number to number 10. Okay, and then for the R2, we'll set the priority number to number 9. And then we will not gonna make any changes of the R3 and R4. So let's leave them alone so that they can stay on the default one, which is number 1. Okay, so we'll try to put the highest priority number, okay, again on the R1, and then the second highest would be on the R2. And to do that, we need to go to the gigabit 0/0. So we'll make this as 10, all right, and then on the R2, we'll make it as 9. So let's open the R1. I'll hit enter to get started. I'll type here enable to go to the privilege mode, COM-T, and then interface gigabit 0/0, and then I'll type here IP space OSPF, and then space, let's type question mark. So we'll be using here is the priority. So I'll type here priority, and then space question mark. So we do have a from 0 to 255 to input. So on the R1, we'll put it number 10. There you go. And then Control C. Let me save the configuration, and then I'll close this. Let's go to the R2. So on this R2, I'll hit enter to get started, and then enable COM-T to go to global config mode, and then I'll go to the interface gigabit 0/0, and then I'll type here IP OSPF, and then priority. Let's make this R2 then as the priority number 9. There you go. So Control C, and then let me save the configuration. There you go. So now let's try to check then if the R1 is now the designated router, okay, and then if the R2 is now the backup designated router. So let's try to check that on this R4. Let's open the R4, and then I'll hit enter to get started. I'll type here enable, and then let me type here show IP OSPF, and then neighbor. Let's see. So as you can see in here that the R1, okay, this is the R1. Even if we set it to priority number 10, it is not acting as the what I call this the DR, right? And also the router number 2, which is the 1.2, still it is not acting as the BDR. Okay. Well, the election process is actually taking some time. So to resolve that, okay, so since I am on this R1, so we need to let's say reload the switch. I'm sorry, reload the router. Okay. All right. So let me type here reload. There you go. I'll close this, and then I'll go to the R2. I'll do the same thing. I'll reload it. Okay, and then R3. I'll hit enter and then enable. Then I'll type here reload, and then last router. Let me type here reload. Or if you don't want to use the reload command, then you can also use this command. I'll go to the R2. Okay, you can do this. Type enable. You can also type, let's say, clear, and then space IP, and then space OSPF, and then process. All right, you can actually execute this command per router, but sometimes is clearing the IPOS OSPF is also not working. That is why reloading then the router is the recommended one. Okay, and now let's try. Let's open the R4, and I'll do it again. I'll type here enable. I'll type here show IP OSPF, and then neighbor. There you go. And let me spread this. And as you can see in here, that the 1.1, okay, this is the router 1, okay, router 1, all right, and it has the priority number of number 10, and now it is acting as the DR, okay, full DR. And then the 1.2, okay, it has the priority number 9. This is the router number 2, and it is acting as the full BDR. Okay, that is good. Well, you can actually try to play around with the network. Let's say if you want this R3 to be the DR or BDR, or let's say the R4 will be the BDR or DR, okay? So you can try to do some observation and experiment. You can play around with the priority number. You can play around with the router ID, virtual interfaces, and also non-virtual interfaces to select the highest IP address. Okay? If you like this video, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's Dan's IT Network to get more updates about Cisco CCNA. And if you have any questions, suggestions, and you're requesting for a video tutorial, then you can email me at dansitnetwork@gmail.com, or you can put it on the comment section below. Thanks. Bye.